Okay, welcome to episode 63 of the Apple Podcast by MaxFuture.com. This is the episode that should come out on the 18th of March 2011, and it's been a really interesting week in Apple news, and we should start off first by talking about the tragedy in Japan. Okay, so one of the more interesting stories this week that circulated on the internet, which was a happy story in some way and a tragic story in another way, was something that was on Kevin Rose's blog. Kevin Rose is the head of Dig and Revision 3, founder of dig.com. And he has a friend who, I guess, works in Japan at an Apple store. And the friend emailed him, and it was very inspiring. And apparently, there's this unbelievable tragedy and disaster in Japan between the earthquake, the tsunami, and the radiation. And he got an email from his friend, and I'll read it to you. It's very nice. It says, "Dear Alex, L, David, and Kevin, hi, this is," and they X'd out his name, "in Japan. As you all must have heard, the fifth largest earthquake in recorded history hit us on Friday, 2:30 p.m. Japan time. As Alex often says on This Week in Mac, stories on the ground are often quite different from the stories in the news, and there is a tech story that I'd really like to tell. The story of Apple Inc. in Japan. Full disclosure, I work at Apple at one of its stores in Japan. The earthquake hit while I was working on the first floor of one of their stores. As the entire building swayed, the staff calmly led the people from the top 5 floors down to the first floor and under the ridiculously strong wooden tables that hold up the display computers. 7 hours and 118 aftershocks later, the store was still open. Why? Because with the phone and train lines down, taxis stopped and millions of people stuck in the Tokyo shopping district scared with no access to television. Hundreds of people were swarming into Apple stores to watch the news on Ustream and contact their friends via Twitter, Facebook, and email. The young did it on their mobile devices while the old clustered around the Macs. There were even some Android users there. There are almost no free Wi-Fi spots in Japan besides Apple stores, so even Android users often come to the stores. He goes on to say, you know how in disaster movies people on the street gather around electronic shops that have TVs in the display windows so they can stay informed with what is going on? In this digital age, that's what the Tokyo Apple store became. Staff brought out surge protectors and extension cords with tens of iOS device adapters so people could charge their phones and pads and contact their loved ones. Even after we finally had to close 10 p.m., crowds of people huddled in front of our stores to use the Wi-Fi into the night, as it was still the only way to get access to the outside world. Anyway, I mention this not because I work at Apple now, or because I'm an admitted fanboy, but because I'm genuinely proud of the Apple Japan staff and their willingness to stay open to help people that day. And I'm also impressed with the way Apple's products, and yes, Google's, Twitter's, and Facebook's, helped them that day. Even after we had to close, many of the staff stayed outside the store to fix iPhones in teaching people how to contact family or stay informed via Wi-Fi. This Week in Mac, Twit, and Revision 3 have talked about the power of tech in the cloud during the recent global events, so I wanted to let you know of one more example during the great Tohoku earthquake in Japan. Sincerely, and his name is redacted. So this is very inspiring. So the other thing that Apple did, which is also inspiring, is that in the iTunes store, they created a button that you could go to, and you could directly contribute to Japanese charities through your iTunes account or your, I guess, App Store account. And Apple is not, of course, taking the 30% cut, as it does for other things that are sold through iTunes. So that's really a nice thing for Apple to do. And if you got the video version of this, I can show you the button in iTunes. Very cool. Now, another Japan tragedy-related Apple story comes from the website gigaom.com. And it's a story about, I guess, the developers' panic. And the headline is Panic Donating Proceeds from Software Sales to Help Japan. And according to the GigaOM article, Panic, which is the company behind some Mac applications like the HTML editor Coda, announced this past Thursday that all proceeds taken until tomorrow morning will be donated to the Japanese relief effort. And so the company announced this past Thursday that all sales of any of the company's software between 10 a.m. March 17th and 10 a.m. March 18th will be donated directly to a mix of the Japanese Red Cross Society and the Mercy Corps based in Portland, Oregon. And that includes both sales on Panic's own site and sales made through the Mac App Store. And the company said absolutely 100% of the proceeds will be donated. So, that's a really nice gesture by one Apple developer. And I think others are doing the same thing. So kudos to Panic. It makes me want to buy something from them. Okay, the other impact of the disaster in Japan is something that I saw on 9to5mac.com. And it's actually re-reporting a story from iSupply, which I guess is a website that tracks Apple-related supply issues. And according to iSupply, Japan's earthquake poses potential supply problems for the iPad 2. And what iSupply said is the aftermath of the Japanese earthquake may cause logistical disruptions and supply shortages in Apple Inc.'s iPad 2, which employs several components manufactured in the disaster-stricken country, including a hard-to-replace electronic compass, the battery, and possibly the advanced technology glass in the display. This is what iSupply's research indicates. iSupply had done a tear-down analysis of the iPad 2 and has been able to identify 5 parts that are sourced from Japanese suppliers. These are the NAND flash from Toshiba Corp., the Dynamic Random Access Memory DRAM made by Elpida Memory Inc., an electronic compass from AKM Semiconductor, and the touchscreen overlay glass from Asahi Glass Co., and a system battery from Apple Japan Inc. iSupply also said that there potentially are other components from Japan in the iPad 2. However, the teardown analysis doesn't identify all the component countries of origin. iSupply also basically said that while some of the suppliers reported that their facilities were undamaged, delivery of components from all of these companies is likely to be impacted, at least to some degree, by logistical issues now plaguing most Japanese industries in the quake zone. This is very interesting. iSupply also says the suppliers are expected to encounter difficulties in getting raw materials supplied and distributed, as well as in shipping out products. They also are facing difficulties with employee absences because of problems with the transportation system, and various challenges are being compounded by interruptions in electric supply, which also, according to iSupply, can have a major impact on delicate processes such as semiconductor lithography. Furthermore, iSupply says semiconductor facilities in Japan that had suspended manufacturing activities following the quake cannot truly commence full production again until after the aftershocks cease. iSupply said earthquakes ranging from 4 to 7 on the Richter scale will make it impossible to really restart these fabs until the earthquake stops happening with such frequency. iSupply cited a guy named Dale Ford of IHS. iSupply also pointed out that every time a quake tops 5, the equipment in Japan automatically shuts down. So this is a real this is a real issue for Apple. We may be seeing additional shortages of the iPad 2 and maybe other Mac and Apple-related products. iSupply said that Apple's supply of NAND flash has come under scrutiny in light of a temporary suspension of production and the resulting scrapping of some wafers at Toshiba's main NAND facility. However, the NAND devices used in the iPad are available from alternative sources, including South Korea semiconductor giant Samsung and U.S. memory maker Micron. iSupply also points out that the Elpida DRAM component can be alternatively sourced from Samsung. It goes on to say that the compass and glass supply could prove to be more problematic issues for Apple. It said that the fab that produces the electronic compass used in the iPad was undamaged by the quake, and that the company's shipments are likely to be impacted by the same logistical issues that plague all Japanese industries during this short term. Now, as for the compass, they are available from other sources, including Yamaha, Aichi Steel, Alps, and ST Microelectronics. But iSupply says that even these components are not easily replaceable. iSupply's report says, quote, "The calibration of electronic compasses is tricky for a number of reasons," quoting Jeremy Bouchard, Director and Principal Analyst for MEMS and Sensors at IHS. According to this person, quote, "Compasses are sensitive to electromagnetic interference. Furthermore, the iPad 2's compass works in close coordination with the tablet's accelerometer and gyroscope, and that this makes it impossible to simply replace one manufacturer's compass with another." So this is a very interesting report, because what this means is that nobody really knows to what extent the Japanese earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear accident can really disrupt a lot of Apple's production. I mean, a lot of people think Apple's stuff is all produced in China, and it may be assembled in China, but obviously components are coming from all sorts of places, particularly the high-tech companies of Korea and Japan. Now, everything might not be so bleak for Apple and its sales and production. As an interesting story from the appleblog.com entitled "Apple's App Store Ecosystem Grows with Mac Sales." Now remember, there's now a Mac App Store on the Mac that's similar to the App Store for the iPhone, the iPad, and of course iTunes. And according to the Apple blog, which is a GigaOM website, there's a chart on that website, and the chart is downloads and revenue in Apple's application stores in February 2011. And according to GigaOM, the latest report covering App Store sales from the research firm Distimo is out, and it offers revealing insights into the early successes of the Mac App Store and how that most recent extension of the digital software sales compares to the other Apple products, the iPhone, the iPad. And the good news is, just 2 months into the launch, an application in the top 300 on the Mac App Store already generates half as much revenue as one in the top 300 on the iPad App Store. And so that's an interesting stat, according to GigaOM, considering the age of the distribution channel and the fact that the Mac App Store isn't guaranteed to be universally present on every Mac running OS X. This means those numbers should only continue to grow as adoption increases among the general Mac user population. So it also goes on to say that this is all good news for developers, since according to the report, the average selling price of a Mac app title is $11.21 in the top 300 list, which is 7 times greater than the average selling price of an iPhone app, which is only $1.57. And it's 3 times greater than an iPad app of $4.19. Also, free apps remain a much more of a rare thing on the Mac app platform. So, the chart basically shows that, still the iPhone, in terms of total sales, is much, much greater than the Mac App Store or apps for the iPad. But there has been significant growth in the last month or so, and the Mac App Store is catching up. It's on its way. So, eventually we may see a unified App Store. That's what I think we're going to get. Okay, so there was also very interesting news on another area of Apple's business, and that is the business of selling or renting movies and TV shows. Because there was a good story out on the appleblog.com, another GigaOM site, and it was entitled, "What Are Apple's Options in the Video War with Netflix?" And the story had a recent survey by a company called NPD. And it basically said that the iTunes Store accounted for just 4% of video downloaded or streamed through February of this year in the U.S., making it just one of many also-rans trailing Netflix, which dominates the download or streaming market by having 61% of the download or streaming market. And what GigaOM says is that twisting the knife, at least, part of Netflix's success is a direct result of Apple, as more than 100 million iOS devices can stream Netflix content. And in January, Netflix announced that the Apple TV, quote, in just 4 months, has passed the also growing iPad in Netflix, the Apple TV, in Netflix viewing hours, end quote. So GigaOM raises a very interesting question, which is, what is Apple to do in the face of letting Netflix capture this sort of dominating area? Now, the other news that came out this week is that Netflix is bidding on an original TV show produced by David Finch, and he's the director of The Social Network. And apparently Netflix has outbid like other TV networks and cable companies, and Netflix may get the exclusive right to this TV show. I think it's called The House of Cards, and the TV show stars Kevin Spacey. So this is a real issue because it looks like Netflix is trying to continue to expand its content. Now, GigaOM in this article suggests that Apple might try to curry favor with the big video producers and saying, come to us, because then we can act as a defense against Netflix dominating the streaming or download industry. But Apple is in a catch-22 because Netflix is on all its devices, in particular the Apple TV and the iPad. And so to some extent, Netflix helps sell those devices. On the other hand, it's competing with Apple's own streaming content and selling content because, frankly, Netflix is rather cheap. You only pay like $8 or $9 a month, and you get a lot from its catalog. So GigaOM is suggesting that maybe Apple should insist on taking a 30% cut of Netflix business, and if it does that, Netflix may leave. But that's a double-edged sword, because if Netflix leaves the Apple TV and the iPad, maybe people won't want the Apple TV or iPad and maybe go to a competing Android-type device. So it's a very provocative article, and I'm not sure what the best thing is for Apple consumers like us and Apple itself. Personally, I'm thrilled, and I mentioned this last week, with Apple having MLB app and the NBA app on the Apple TV. And I would like to see Apple increase content. So my suggestion would be keep Netflix there, but continue to develop more and more diverse content on iTunes so that it competes with Netflix. And I think Apple should go out and bid on its own shows and offer them exclusively. But I also think Apple should come up in iTunes with its own streaming content plan, where for X dollars a month you can stream all the movies and TV shows in its library. Now the thing is, it might not be lucrative enough for Apple, and I gotta wonder what are Netflix margins, because for $8 a month getting all this content, is Netflix really making significant profits? I know they're expanding their user base, but they're expanding it at the cost of very low price subscription fee. So this is a very interesting sort of battle and development that's going on in this highly contested space, and Apple does not control the the market for video and TV like it does for music. Now our next story goes to something about Lion, which is that fabulous new operating system that's going to be coming out in the summer from Apple on Macintoshes, and I don't know if other websites are violating the non-disclosure agreement that they would have as developers, because when you get Lion now as a beta, you're essentially getting it because you signed up for the developers program. But Apple Insider seems to be always publishing stories about the Lion app, the Lion operating system. And they never say it's from a source, or sometimes they don't, which makes it sound like maybe they have the program themselves. But anyways, on March 15th, Tuesday, they had an interesting article called Inside Mac OS X 10.7 Lion, New Wi-Fi Diagnostic Tools. And what they say is that in Lion, Apple has added a new Wi-Fi diagnostic utility to monitor the performance of wireless networks, record events, capture raw network frames, and log diagnostic data that can be sent to Apple by users for troubleshooting. Now this is very useful, because even if you don't send it to Apple, it can help you really keep track of how well your wireless connections are holding up in your home or if you're on the road. Now according to Apple Insider, the new app is in the hidden Systems Library Core Services folder. That's System/Library/Core Services folder. And according to the story, that's where Apple stores a variety of utility apps that are integrated into the Mac desktop, including the Dock, Finder, Software Update, and Archive utility. And so in this story by Apple Insider, it says that users can launch the tool by option-clicking on the Wi-Fi menu bar icon, which then presents an otherwise hidden open Wi-Fi diagnostic option. And in the picture, when you open that, the tool presents options to monitor performance, record events, capture raw frames, or turn up debug loop logs. Now, for example, under Monitor Performance, it says, Monitor Performance displays a graph of network's signal strength, noise level, transmit power, and data rate. Similarly, Record Events detects and reports drop network connections, roaming, and other network events, such as connecting to or disconnecting from a network or network device. So that's very useful information. The third category, Capture Raw Frames, captures all network traffic on the Wi-Fi interface, and Turn on Debug Logs provides specific detail of every wireless connection. So look, this is very useful. Similarly, the article says that Monitor Performance works similar to Airport Utility Wireless Client's graphing feature, but provides a more detailed presentation of signal and noise for the client. Rather than tracking every active client on a given base station, it can also report the collected data to Apple for use in troubleshooting issues. So that's kind of cool. It just seems like you're going to have much more options to really know what the hell's going on on your Wi-Fi network. It says other options log events or capture raw frame data in the background to a temporary .pcap packet capture file, which can similarly be reported to Apple for troubleshooting help. So it sounds like when you're in this sort of nightmare situation with Wi-Fi, you're just going to have better feedback from Apple support by giving them data. So this is very useful. Okay, the next story really affects, I guess, the iPhone and iPod Touch, and that is that the company Algorithm GmbH, which came out with the fabulous iPad app called DJ, now has the DJ app available for the iPhone and iPod Touch. And this app costs $9.99, but I got to tell you, I'm thinking of getting it because I have the $20 version of the app that's on the iPad, and it's fabulous. So basically, this is the description in the App Store, which is that the DJ app transforms your iPhone or iPod Touch into a full-fledged portable DJ system and seamlessly integrates with your iPod library, giving you direct access to all your favorite tracks and playlists. And it has a hyper-realistic touchscreen interface and ultra-low latency, which converge to offer you a truly professional mixing area. Now, on the iPad, this is fantastic. You can really feel like you're mixing two records. So the features include direct access to iPod library, hyper-realistic low-latency turntable interface, exclusive portrait and landscape modes, auto mix mode with automatic transition control, fade, backspin, reverse, break, and random. Now, those features are on the iPad, and it's amazing because the auto mix allows you to just set a folder of music, and you could set certain parameters, and it just mixes the music and does things like back scratches and reverse scratches and breaks automatically, but you can also do it manually. The app includes looping, so you can also do cue point triggering. You could also do live recording, where you record your mix and save it as a song. And also it works with AirPlay so that you can wirelessly transmit your music via the Apple TV or Airport Express base station. Now that's huge, because if you have a party, you could have speakers hooked up to the Apple TV or the Airport Express, and you put it on the other side of the room or the big party, and through Wi-Fi you're going to be broadcasting your iPad all around. Now, I may try doing this because, I use this app on the iPad for a holiday party where I work. But if I just brought along my Airport Express, I could walk around and wirelessly transmit the music, which is very cool. So I would suggest this. This is great that it's also coming to the iPad and iPod Touch. They also make, the same company, an app for the iPhone called DJ Remote. And DJ Remote allows you through, I guess, Wi-Fi to control the DJ app on the Mac. So there's also a Mac app. That's where it first started. I don't have the Mac app, but you know what? You know what some developers should do? A developer should basically sell an app for one price that works on your iPhone, your iPad, and your Mac, and say, look, if you're going to get this whole bundle together, it's a universal app that works on all three. Now, right now, Apple does have universal apps that are universal between the iPhone and the iPad, but the apps don't also work on the Mac. You have to get a separate app for that. But I bet you in some future SDK, I bet you for iOS 5, Apple will create the ability to do a universal application that'll work on your Mac as well as on the iPhone and iPad. Anyways, those are my thoughts. Okay, so another story comes via, I guess, the website HardMac, and that is that the iPhone 5, which is soon going to come out, they claim to have an inside track on what the iPhone 5 will look like. And they claim that some cases that have been released show that the iPhone 5 will not look that different than the iPhone 4. And so in this picture, HardMac reveals like photos of the supposed iPhone 5 cases, and it looks like the shape and size is essentially the same as the iPhone 4. Now, one thing that's interesting is very soon after that, I guess 9 to 5 Mac revealed that there was a mistake. That actually the cases are cases for the iPhone 4. But what's interesting is the story tried to claim that the back of the iPhone 5 will not be a glass back like the iPhone 4, but will be sort of metallic and metal-like like the original iPhone, or like the back of the iPad. But soon thereafter, 9 to 5 Mac corrected itself and said, no, that the backplate case, which is silver, is one for the iPhone 4, and that there's a supplier who's selling a replacement kit where you can actually replace the back of the iPhone 4 so that it's metallic. And actually on eBay, this seller of the back of the iPhone 4 plate is selling it for like $2 or $3, and I guess you could just screw it on yourself. But anyways, nobody really knows what the iPhone 5 will exactly look like. And I do think Apple is going to stick close to the iPhone 4 design. I think the iPhone 4 design is rather nice. I kind of like it. I can see Apple getting rid of the glass back, although my theory is that Apple should eventually turn the glass back into a touch-sensitive back. So I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but to me that would make sense. Now, regarding the iPhone 5, there was a little bit of a controversy this week, as some people online said that the iPhone 5 would not have NFC, which is near-field communication. I've discussed that previously, and near-field communication is that technology that some credit cards have where you can swipe from a distance, some sort of monitor at the cash register, and it would take your transaction. And so there had been speculation for months that Apple's going to include NFC technology in the next iPhone 5, which would allow then the iPhone 5 to process payments. And so there had been stories saying that that's not going to happen. But then Mac Rumors blog pointed out that Forbes said that, in fact, there would be near-field communication system in the coming iPhone 5. And what Mac Rumors says is that Elizabeth Woike claims that despite recent rumors to the contrary, near-field communication payment systems may indeed be coming to the iPhone 5. Woike's sources include secondhand information from an entrepreneur in the NFC industry. From what I hear, it is possible that the iPhone 5 will include NFC. This is what Arnie Kim at Max Rumor says. This is the maxrumor.com website. An entrepreneur who is working on a top secret NFC product told me today that he believes the iPhone 5 will have NFC and cited a friend who works at Apple as a reliable source for the information. So Arnie Kim at maxrumor.com thinks it's going to happen. He says NFC manufacturers are also expecting the iPhone 5 will arrive with an NFC payment system. So Arnold Kim goes on to say, well, we're sure that Apple engineers are working on the technology. This friend of a friend report seems less credible than the Independent's report, which claimed that Apple had informed international carriers that NFC was not coming to this year's iPhone revision. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I think eventually NFC technology is going to come to the iPhone, either the iPhone 5 or the iPhone 6. Now, a companion story that appeared regarding this NFC story is a story by Cult of Macs, Leander Canny, who on March 17th had a story entitled How the iPhone NFC and Mac App Store Will Enable Remote Computing. And this is really fascinating. What Candy says is, with all the rumors about NFC being in the next iPhone or not in the next iPhone, we have a few more details about Apple's remote computing plans that revolve around the technology, and this is what Cult of Mac says. According to a source close to the company, Apple is busy testing several prototype iPhones with near-field communications. Unfortunately, the source has no knowledge of when Apple will actually introduce the technology in the iPhone. It could be next model, due this summer, or next year, they said. However, Apple is working out the kinks in an ambitious remote computing system, Kander says, and a key component utilizes the recent launched Mac App Store. So what he says is that Apple is working on a system that allows users to log into another computer using an NFC-equipped iPhone. The iPhone pairs with the host machine and loads the user's files and settings over the net. It's as though the user is sitting at their own machine at home. According to the source, when NFC-equipped iPhone is paired with a guest machine, part of the user's profile includes the apps that have been purchased through the Mac App Store. The icons for their apps appear on the remote Mac, but aren't downloaded, the source said. But if the user opens an app, it is downloaded temporarily to the computer for use. When the NFC connection is broken, the apps are deleted and the computer returns to its previous state. And he goes on to say Apple is developing a way to auto-save files created within the app. The files are transmitted to Apple's server, so anything the user does with certain apps, like creating a document in Pages, is automatically saved and synced with MobileMe. So he says, quote, when you return to your home computer, your stuff is there waiting for you, end quote, the source said. He then goes on to say Apple already has parts of the system baked into its next operating system, Lion, which is currently in beta testing. So this is pretty amazing stuff. I mean, it makes sense that Apple's going this route. Apple, you have all these iDevices, which are really like mini Macs that fit into your pocket, and Macs that are iPad sizes. And the idea would be you'd have all your profiles like synced together and able to just move them around. So I'd love to see this. To me, this is like one of the most exciting things that could happen. Okay, so one of the crazy things that happened this week regarding Apple concerns its stock price. And on the 16th of March, Apple's stock price took a major dive when an analyst, a stock analyst named Guana, basically downgraded Apple on Wednesday the 16th, and Apple, dropped I think like $15 on that one day, in addition to the drop on Tuesday. And it was very controversial because this analyst was questioning Apple's continued growth, and basically he claimed that he had checked with Foxconn and other manufacturers for Apple in China, and that there was going to be a slowdown in production by those companies. But those companies didn't say that Apple orders were down, and nobody knows really who Apple has lined up for suppliers. Apple is very secretive. And what was even more bizarre, there are huge lines and huge demands for the iPad 2. I mean, people are dying to get the iPad 2. There's incredible demand. And here's this one analyst who basically is saying that, Apple's going to underperform. Well, the stock rebounded, and shortly thereafter, I think this one writer, I guess for Fortune, basically pointed out that Apple is still a very strong company. So what this other writer from Fortune had pointed out is that other analysts had actually gone the opposite way, and that Apple actually, a lot of people expect Apple to go up. And he pointed out, and I just have some bullet points that he listed here, he was initiating with outperform coverage, according to some analysts, and that there's a $500 target price, and that iPhone is still in the driver's seat, and that the iPad is totally dominating. So this downgrade by one analyst from one investment bank, I don't think it lasted very long, and very quickly other analysts attacked him and said, he's incorrect. Now, if you have one of the new MacBook Pros, you may be experiencing what I consider to be a rather minor problem. But it's a story that MacRumors.com reported on March 17th, which is that home sharing, which is the ability to share your iTunes folder, an iTunes application and content with some other computer on your network, there might be problems with that if you have one of the new MacBook Pros, because that's one of the major new features in Apple's iOS 4.3. In other words, actually it's sharing from your computer to an iPhone or iPad, because one of the beautiful things about iOS 4.3 is when I'm in my home Wi-Fi network through my iPad or iPhone, I can actually access iTunes content on my iMac, which is pretty amazing, because you might not care as much about how much storage space you have on your iPad or iPhone if you can just tap into whatever is on your computer's iTunes account. But according to MacRumors, their users are experiencing problems with the new MacBook Pros, and actually MacRumors credits Apple Insider and a thread on Apple support discussion as revealing that a number of owners of Apple's new MacBook Pros are experiencing problems with the home sharing capability. And now, according to MacRumors, the experience with MacRumors' new 17-inch MacBook Pro quad-core, they found that it didn't work very well with home sharing. And so, I don't have a new MacBook Pro, but my guess is that Apple will probably issue a software patch that will fix whatever it is, because it does sound like a software issue. Okay, so the next story is a little tip and also an observation by me. One of the things that I find annoying when you're on 3G, whether it's with the iPad or iPhone, is that unless you jailbreak the device, you're limited to 20 megabyte downloads. And that's for both apps and for podcasts and for music. Now, I find that particularly annoying because most podcasts are more than 20 megabytes down. And so if you're on the go and you're not in a Wi-Fi area, it's really hard to download a podcast. But one of the silly things is that technically when you're on 3G, you can download more than 20 megabytes. Because I found this little loophole in Apple's iOS and AT&T or Verizon's policy, and that is if you go to iTunes and you go to the podcast that you want to download and instead you press play, the podcast will start playing, and it'll start, you can see, and I have a screenshot here, you can see that it starts queuing. And what that queuing is, it's in the background, it's caching. And what's interesting is that I've been able to cache like 50 minutes because I've gone into a subway where there's no Wi-Fi, no 3G, and my streaming podcast on iTunes continues to play for the whole subway ride, which could be 30 minutes, 40 minutes. So more than 20 megabytes is coming down when it's caching like that. And the weird thing is you can get out of the iTunes app and go do other things on your iPhone, and the cached iPod podcast, the cached podcast will continue to play. So my point is that when you stream your over 20 megabyte podcast, it is coming down to your computer or to your iPhone or iPad. So why doesn't Apple and AT&T and Verizon just let you save it? Because now what happens is if you stop playing the iTunes streaming podcast and go back to iTunes, it's gone. The cache is no longer saved. So it's a little tip, a little, annoying complaint, but I really think Apple should cure that. Now, eventually, if you can jailbreak your iPhone or iPad, there's a great jailbreak app called 3G inhibitor. And 3G inhibitor, which is a couple of bucks, essentially fools the iOS into thinking that you're on Wi-Fi when you have a 3G connection. And guess what? You can download over 20 megabyte files. So try that if you feel like jailbreaking. Now, one of the more geekier controversies that came out this week was an accusation by a website called The Register, which claimed that Apple is intentionally crippling web applications on iOS. And what the story claimed is, Apple has this new, Java engine on the Safari browser on iDevices, which makes browsing on the internet quicker. And what the Register claimed was that Apple was purposely crippling web apps. Those web apps are essentially apps that are not, native apps that are developed to go through the App Store, but essentially Apple allows you to save a website to your home screen of your iPad or iPhone. And web apps are essentially web pages that can act as apps and run on your iPhone or iPad, although in a limited way. And what the Register is claiming is that Apple wasn't giving those web apps the same right to access the faster engine for Safari. So this was a little bit of a brouhaha, but other people came back and said, no, it's only if you go to full screen mode. If instead the web app launches through the Safari browser, you get this speed. So this was a very geeky debate, and the esteemed blogger John Gruber of Daring Fireball jumped in too. And I guess the consensus by a lot is that, it might be a glitch by Apple, and Apple may update it, but they don't think that Apple intentionally crippled web apps. So we'll have to see what happens. Personally, I don't really use any web apps because I find that they are very limited, because they can't really write advanced applications that take advantage of all the hardware that Apple has on the iPhone and iPad. So, this may be just a controversy among the geeks that follow the iPad, the iPhone, and Android devices. Okay, so the next story really affects all Mac-related devices, computer devices like the iPhone, the iPad, and the Macintosh, as well as other people who like to read stuff on the web. And that's basically an announcement by the New York Times that starting March 28th, the New York Times will go to a paywall. And basically, you're going to get some limited access on the internet to the New York Times newspaper, and also through links, so that if someone links a New York Times article, you may be getting more than, let's say, 20 links, or 20 times to see the New York Times. And they're going to a pay model, and basically on the iPhone, if you pay $15 a month for the iPhone app, you get access on the iPhone app to the New York Times content, and also on the computer browser. And if you, on the iPad, you have to get a separate iPad app and pay $20 per month, and you also get the web access. But if you want to see it both on your iPhone and iPad and on the computer, it's $35 a month. Now this is crazy, and I have an article entitled "The New York Times New Paywall Will Kill Trees." And the reason it's crazy is that if the New York Times is saying if you get the paper subscription of the New York Times, you also get free access to the internet and to the iPad app and to the iPhone app. Well, the New York Times paper subscription for a year in New York City is $281. But if you wanted to then read it both on the iPad and the iPhone and the web, you'd have to pay collectively $420, even if you didn't want the paper. So this is nuts. So the New York Times plan essentially has you paying more if you don't get paper, but less if you get paper and the internet. This is counterintuitive. Okay, so another great story that came out was from ZDNet this week, and the story revolved around Microsoft killing the Zune. The Zune, is that iPod competitor that came out in the early part of last decade to try to compete with the iPhone. I'm sorry, the iPod. Well, anyways, but ZDNet had a really interesting article called Apple, the world's most important Windows software developer. And it was actually, what was kind of interesting was that Apple actually does make a lot of software on Windows, that work. For example, the most famous software is iTunes. I mean, if Apple hadn't expanded the iPod so that it could sync with music on Windows, would the iPod have been as successful as it is? And the way Apple expanded it was by creating an iTunes application that works on Windows. So that's one point that this article is trying to make, is that Apple is actually a huge Windows software developer. The other thing that Apple makes is Safari. But also, it pointed out there's other applications. For example, Apple owns FileMaker Pro. FileMaker is a great cross-platform database building application. It's highly enterprise and highly professional. So I thought this was really interesting insight by ZDNet, that Apple actually develops a lot on Windows. And actually, the more I think about it, Microsoft develops a lot on Apple, because obviously the Office suite that's on the Mac is crucial. Look, in the end, I really think, if Apple wants to really penetrate enterprise, it should do something to try to get Microsoft's Office application suite on the iDevices like the iPad and the iPhone. So maybe Apple and Microsoft can learn to get along with each other, because maybe they'll see that they have common enemies in, like, Amazon and Google and Facebook. So maybe that will come to pass. Okay, so my last story is really something that I ranted about on the maxfuture.com blog. And that is, apparently there was a MSN story report that the singer, the rock star or rock guy named John Bon Jovi, had done an interview for the upcoming Sunday, I guess the New York Sunday Times. And in it he slams Steve Jobs. And Bon Jovi claims that iTunes has killed the music industry. He claimed it destroyed the magical experience of buying records in the store. And MSN had Bon Jovi saying the following, quote, "God, it was magical, magical time," he continues. "I hate to sound like an old man now, but I am, and you mark my words, in a generation from now people are going to say, 'What happened? Steve Jobs is personally responsible for killing the music business.'" Well, you know what, John Bon Jovi, I think that's ridiculous, okay? The music business killed itself. So I say, well, congratulations, John Bon Jovi. You are now officially an outdated musician. First off, rock and roll and its origins are all about new technology, exciting the youth, and scaring the shit out of old fogies stuck in the technology of the past. Remember, Mr. Bon Jovi, rock and roll took off when things like amps and electric guitars came around. All the old people at the time said that this new technology was killing real music. So, Mr. Bon Jovi, you just don't get it. Technology changes and music changes with it. I mean, music is all about technology. I mean, if you want to go back to the time of Beethoven, when Beethoven was composing in the late 18th century, the piano as we know it didn't exist. The harpsichord, its predecessor, was around. The piano was a new instrument. It was all because of technology, and he was one of the first people to write for this new technology. And I'm sure that people at the time were like John Bon Jovi, saying that Ludwig van Beethoven is killing music. Similarly, the whole jazz era in the 20s was all about brass instruments, and it took all sorts of refining and innovation in making brass instruments that allowed the whole jazz era to occur. And certainly rock and roll is about being electric. I mean, if we didn't have electric guitars, could you imagine what the musicians who were, had been around for 30 years thought about when the first electric guitar came around? They thought, blasphemy, blasphemy, this is crazy. Anyways, in my blog, I say, second, unlike you, I don't pine for the music stores of the 70s and 80s in my youth. I couldn't afford to sample a lot of new music because albums were overpriced and the music distribution system was controlled by big labels. Napster and then iTunes suddenly opened up a world where I could hear and sample all sorts of new music and bands when never before had I had the financial inclination to spend all my money at the Virgin conglomerate. Third, in the old days, from where you come from, the only romanticism was by those crooks and payola executives at the big labels who controlled radio playlists and other distribution methods. I don't think people remember, but really, the radio was controlled by the big labels who would give like payola to the radio stations, and if you were a new and up-and-coming band and couldn't get signed by a big label, forget it. Now iTunes now allows any independent band to distribute music through iTunes. Plus, it's the music fans of the internet through blogging, YouTubing, and social media who spread the word of truly new and innovative talents. Bottom line, Steve Jobs aged, but he didn't get old, unlike Mr. Bon Jovi. Mr. Jobs is still youthful and innovative. On the other hand, Mr. Bon Jovi is stuck in the past and pining for the days when he was musically relevant. Believe me, romanticism for music hasn't declined or ended, but you just can't understand how kids relate to music and the technology which fuels pop music. Now, P.S. MSN Post says that Bon Jovi's tour is the highest earner of 2010. Well, I wouldn't be surprised if the average age of those who attend the tour is in the 40s and in the 50 range age group. Now, sure, those fans will pony up money to relive their high school proms, but music goes forward hand in hand with innovations in technology, so the future is hard for any musician to stomach. Anyways, that's my rant about the John Bon Jovi statement. And thanks for listening to the Max Future Apple podcast. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Take care.